Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Masters in Finance How to Submit a Strong Application webinar. My name is Lucky Singh, and I'm the Student Recruitment Manager for the Masters in Finance program. Here with me today is Peter Johnson, who's the Senior Admissions Manager for the Masters in Finance program. The webinar, in terms of structure, will be an overview of LBS and the Masters in Finance. I will talk to you a little bit about how to prepare your the application and the kind of things that you can do before you start your application. And then my colleague Peter will be taking you through the admissions requirements and everything you need to know about getting into the program. Following that, we will be having a short Q&A session. So please do save the questions that you have for the end, but please do send them through the link. So I just wanted to kind of take you briefly through the London Business School and kind of some of the things that I think you should really know. So I'm sure you know we have a world-class faculty. So our faculty come from various different areas of the globe and have an amazing reputation globally and have an amazing reputation here at the school. We've also got an outstanding peer group. So across the portfolio of programs, as you can imagine, we do accept only the very best into our programs. So you have a chance to kind of socialize and attend electives with a range of different students with an incredibly diverse work experience and culture and background. We've also got our amazing campus in Regent's Park here in London. And the London location is something that a lot of our students rave about. London is a cultural centre. It's also got an amazing variety of different cuisines and cultures, and as you can imagine, a lot of the major businesses in the globe have headquarters here in London. We also operate in terms of a global mindset. So our faculty are from different areas of the globe. Our programs don't just focus on London or Europe or America, but we focus on every aspect of business across the globe. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot of the programs that we offer here at LBS. So as you can see, we have a range of different programs in the early career portfolio. And in terms of the mid-career, you've got the Masters in Finance and the MBA. So as you may know, you need to have a minimum of 2 years postgraduate work experience to be eligible for either the MIF or the MBA. And then following that, we have a range of different executive programs. So we have an EMBA London and EMBA Dubai. We also have EMBA Globals that operate in America, Europe, and Asia. And we also have a Masters in Leadership and Strategy and a range of different courses in the executive education space. So taking you briefly through the Masters in Finance program. Here is a snapshot of the class. So the MIF full-time 2020 graduating class has 117 students, 30% of which are female. 29 years is the average age. As you can imagine, we have a range of different nationalities represented, so over 37 for the full-time, and a range of different students from all over the globe, so 96% are international. And in terms of the average work experience, that's about 5.6 years. Here's just a quick snapshot of where our students come from in terms of nationality. So as you can see, all the way from North America, Latin America, Africa, Asia, Europe, and ironically enough, only 4% from the UK. So incredibly diverse. And obviously this is a snapshot of nationality, but our students have come from a range of different professional finance work experience and backgrounds. So really is an amalgamation of different people from different cultures. A snapshot of the of the part-time class. So we've got 74 students, 23 of which are female. An average of 30 years is the average age. 32 nationalities. 84% are international, and an average of 7 years work experience. And again, here's a snapshot of where our students come from. And yes, so this is a really lovely picture of our current class. So as you can see, we're joined by Francois, who's our dean. You can see Peter and Alex and the admissions team in front of the class. So I just wanted to kind of give you a very brief overview of the Masters in Finance program. So before you start the program, we don't just kind of, make you jump in at the deep end. There are a couple of kind of prep modules that you can do online. We also have a week of orientation. So the full-time and the part-time class are together for a week where you kind of get to know each other. You have kind of, exercises where you get to know each other and build those relationships. We also have kind of prep accounting modules, data analytics, and just kind of giving you an idea of what to expect on the program. We also have just over 5 core courses. So these are the kind of fundamentals of finance that we think everybody on the program needs to know. And the way that it works is some of our students will be really good in some, and perhaps there'll be a gap in their knowledge in others. So it's just making sure that everybody's got a good foundation of finance. And then we have a range of different electives to choose from. So we have up to 40 electives that you can choose from, and you can do a minimum of 8 and a maximum of 10. And we also have concentrations, so you can decide to concentrate in the 4 on the right-hand side, but it's entirely up to you. A lot of our students will choose to concentrate in investment management, for example, or you could just decide to kind of just keep your options really open and do as many different electives as you want. And then throughout the year, you'll be able to kind of take part in practitioner courses. So these are people who come in, from the city and can take you through sort of what being a CFO is all about, for example. And there are a couple of modules, and they're completely optional, but a really, really good way of kind of, finding a little bit more about the kind of track that you want to go in. We also have technical skills. We do things like modules in sort of Python and kind of getting to understand things like coding and things like that, which is a good extra thing that we offer here. You can decide to do an exchange term or an exchange week with some of the universities that we work with. We also do a global immersion elective. So this year it's in Frankfurt and Paris, and really, really good opportunity for you to kind of get immersed in those kind of markets and get to know your peers. And it's a nice way of traveling in Europe as well. So just wanted to give you a brief overview of kind of the similarities and differences in the MIF full-time and the part-time program. So the content is exactly the same. You get to do the same amount of electives. The only real difference is kind of the structure of the course and the delivery of the course. So as you can see, the MIF full-time is shorter, so it's up to 16 months, and the part-time is up to 22 months. The full-time is obviously you're going to be on campus for most of the week, whereas the part-time program is taught on Friday evenings and all of Saturday every other week. And just to give you an overview, you can see that the part-time class is slightly smaller than the full-time, and this year's class has a little bit more work experience than the full-time class. So in terms of finding out more before you start applying, so you can obviously download a brochure. You can kind of look at our class directories, look at what the program's all about. You can submit your CV for review. We have information sessions on campus here that take place every month. So please do feel free to attend if you're in London. And you can speak to a student ambassador. So we have so many student ambassadors who are more than happy to speak to you about their kind of current student experience and kind of why they're thinking about doing the program, why they're doing it, and their experience so far. And yes, I think it's a really useful thing for you to know about. Over to you, Peter.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucky. As Lucky said, my name is Peter Johnson. I'm the Senior Admissions Manager for the programme. Basically what that means is that Lucky and her team working on recruitment are the people you'll be in contact with all the time you're inquiring, all the time you're finding out more about the programme. The minute you've decided to apply and you've hit submit, then my team take over we manage the whole of the admissions and selection process. And we take care of you if we make an offer. That will be right up to the start of the programme, where we then hand over to our colleagues in the programme management team. So what I'm going to try and do is to run you through some of the admissions requirements and give you a few hints and tips along the way about submitting your strongest application. But I think in terms of characteristics that we're looking for, and these are touch points throughout the application process, we're looking to access three things, one of which is that you have the academic capacity to do well on a programme like this. It's an intensive programme, it's pitched at a high level, so we need to be confident that you have the basic academic ability to not just pass the programme, but to do well on it. We're looking for leadership potential. As you would expect, we're a business school. That doesn't mean that you've necessarily already run a large team or that you've managed large projects, but we need to get some sense that that is a potential within your career. And as Lucky said already, global mindset is very important to us here. We're very much a global business school. We're teaching finance in a global context. And by global mindset, we don't necessarily mean that you've worked or studied abroad, but it's important to us that you have that kind of perspective, that you're interested in finance as an international business. You're interested in international politics, international developments. So the application, what's required, is relatively straightforward. There's an online application form which you access through our website, which collects a series of factual data about you. We ask for 2 references, and I'll say more about that later. We also have some essay questions. Again, I'll go on to those. In many cases, we will expect people to have GMAT or GRE, and again, I'll go into more detail on that. And we ask you to upload your degree transcripts. Again, this is to give a sense of your previous academic track record and your future potential. So I think my first strong piece of advice is what you should be doing before you even submit your application. And a lot of this is about self-reflection. I think the first thing that's really important is that you research the programme very thoroughly using resources like our website, potentially talking to our student ambassadors and our alumni. You really need to have a good sense that this is the right programme for you at this point in your career, and that it's going to really take you in the direction you want. And I think the best way to approach that is at first by thinking long and hard about what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Think about what your career goals are, but not just in the short term. Think about where you want to be in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. And perhaps expand that more broadly. Think not just about your career goals. Think about what your life goals are, what you want to achieve, what you enjoy doing, where you really believe you add value. And in that self-reflection, I would say, really draw on your family, your friends, your colleagues. If you have a business mentor, spend time with them and really get them to be maybe brutally honest with you, particularly about your areas of challenge. And I think once you've run through that exercise in self-reflection, you potentially then really persuaded yourself that this is the right program for you and that this is the right time to do it. And having done that, I think you'll then find the application very easy to complete. You'll find the essays easier to write. And if you're called for interview, you then have a really compelling case to put forward. You have a really good story to tell. Because until you've really convinced yourself that this is the right program, you're not best positioned to persuade other people. So I think knowing yourself is very much about self-awareness. The application is looking for you to demonstrate your commitment and your motivation. And it's very important to us to know that you're going to be an active contributor to the class. Our classroom style, our whole teaching style is highly collaborative. And that's why we insist that people have an absolute minimum of 2 years finance work experience. And the vast majority will be in the 3 to 7 year experience range. Because that classroom discussion is absolutely integral to the learning. So the more experience you have, the more you'll gain from the program, but also the more you'll contribute to your study group, to the whole of your class, to the wider community. So that point on contribution is very, very critical to our assessment of your application. I'm just going to flash up quickly the essay questions. Not expecting you to read this yet, but this is obviously accessible on our website. And really to highlight that the essay questions are asking two things broadly that are very integral to the application process. The first one is broadly, what do you benefit from the programme? And the second one is broadly, what do you contribute inside and outside the classroom? And just showing you the part-time version, which is essentially the same. So I think, again, this is a critical part in how we assess you as a candidate. In many, many touch points, including the essays, we're looking for you to demonstrate that you've clearly thought through how you will benefit from the programme. And you have a clear sense of what you contribute if you join this school. So another point on writing compelling essays, I think preparation time is obviously really important, but I think much more that's about reflection time. But having written it, try it out on friends and colleagues, get feedback, then you're in the kind of tailor and edit mode. We're not looking for we're looking for, obviously, for good fluency in English. So it's important that you avoid avoidable spelling mistakes. But we don't expect everybody to be basically speaking English as a native English speaker. But do be very, very careful with this. I mean, I think the worst mistakes I've seen are where people have actually got London Business School's name wrong, confused it with another school, where people have just cut and paste answers from one essay to another. That's a bit of a kind of deal breaker. So that's a strong hint. So going on to referees, I think the first point I want to make here is that people perhaps obsess about the wrong element of this. In most cases, we will be expecting people to give 2 work referees. I think the only instance where we think an academic referee makes sense is if it's somebody who's kept in contact with you since you graduated and they've essentially continued to act as a mentor to you. If all they're going to talk about is your performance in your previous studies, that adds relatively little value because we already know that from reading your transcripts. So in the vast majority of cases, I would say nominate 2 work referees. Now that doesn't have to be your current manager, it can be anybody who knows you well in a business context. So it could be a previous boss, it could be a colleague, it could be a client. It's essentially somebody who knows you day to day in a work context. Um, on the second point, the referee's job title is not important to us. A lot of people will seek to get a very, very senior referee. Now, that's absolutely fine, but if they don't know you well, if they don't really know how you perform at work, how you perform in teams, again, they're really not the right referee. It's not the seniority that matters, is that people know you very well in a job context and can therefore answer the questions we ask very well. And finally, if you don't plan to disclose to your line manager, that's absolutely fine. Just give the name, nominate someone who you are happy at this point to submit a reference for you. Now, assuming once your application is complete and we have everything in place, if it all looks good, we will call you for interview. And one of the good things about the huge reach of this programme, which being just about to come up to its 25th anniversary, is we have around 4,500 alumni internationally who help us with interviews. So if we call you for interview, it will be a one-to-one interview with one of the alumni from the programme. We don't require you to come to London for interview if you're not London based. We conduct interviews in all major cities internationally. And the interview format, the interviewer will have in front of them all of your application materials. We will have given them some set questions. We'll have asked them some areas to probe. They're probably somebody who's working in a senior area, a similar area of finance to you. I don't think you should expect a highly technical interview, but you will be expected to talk knowledgeably about your job and to have a good sense of how your future career goals, how you're planning your future career goals, what in your existing background, your existing skill set really is going to enable you to achieve your career goals over time. So the application process, firstly, you submit your application, and once we've got all of the materials, and that includes your references, it's then reviewed by me and my team. If we think it's a good fit, we then call you for interview. And then once we have the report back from your interviewer, the admissions committee, excuse me, the admissions committee then looks at the whole of your application again to make a final decision. And that final decision, let's say it's an offer, then it may be conditional, or it may be unconditional, and then we'll give you a time frame within which to make a final decision. So to give you an indication of what that looks like in dates, on the full-time programme we have 5 application rounds. So we're just coming to the end of round 2, and round 3 will be in January. We then have a set period by which we will advise you whether or not you've been shortlisted for interview, and then a set date by which you'll have our final decision. Now, underlying this, we basically run rolling admissions. So if you submit in advance of these dates, you'll get an earlier decision. And we always try to outperform these dates. And these dates are, of course, available on our website. We aim to operate the same kind of selection criteria throughout the cycle, but I would say aim for the latest for round 4. Round 5 will always tend to be more competitive as spaces are becoming, there are fewer places available. Also, we give more scholarship awards early in the process. If you require something like a student visa, again, applying early is very much to your advantage. For the part-time programme, we run 7 rounds in total, with the final one being rather later, the final round ending on the 9th of June. And this is because people on the part-time programme will predominantly be London-based or based in Western Europe. They're not relocating to study the programme. There are rarely any visa issues involved. So on the part-time programme, we can afford to run a later application process. But the remarks I made earlier about submitting early, I would also apply to the part-time MEF. Earlier on, Lucky referred to submitting your CV for review, and I would definitely encourage you to do that. This is a screenshot from our website. If you go to the Masters in Finance section and the How to Apply page, you get the option to submit your CV for review. If you do that, that comes through to us. We will then have a look through. We will form a view of whether we think you have the kind of experience that's a good fit for the programme, whether it's the right time. And I think the advantage of this is before you put the extra effort into researching the programme, preparing all of your application, you've at least got some sense from us about whether we agree this is something you should seriously consider. And the kind of feedback we might give you is, we think this is excellent, go ahead. We might say, you're in the right direction, but we don't think it's the right time yet. Or we might say, we really don't think this programme is a good fit for you. And if that's the case, we would always try and offer another programme for you to consider from our wide portfolio of master's programmes here at the school. The other big advantage in submitting your CV for review is it means we just know a lot more about you. And as you're discussing your application with Lucky and her team, or me and my team, we can access your CV and we can give you a much more personalised feedback on any question that you ask. And you're also much more on our radar. We hold a lot of events in London and internationally, but also a lot of those events are invitation only. And if you're strongly on our radar, clearly you're in a good position for us to invite you to come in to speaker events, to meet our students, really just to know us and our programme and the school generally much better. And one other resource I would point you to in terms of preparing an application is, again, on our website, we have student and admissions blogs where people from all our programmes, and that's members of staff, our student ambassadors, our students, are regularly posting to give you extra information or to tell you about their experience while studying. And here's a recent example from just a couple of weeks ago where I've posted answering quite a lot of detail, something I'll pick up in a minute about GMAT and GRE. And that's all I wanted to cover. So I hope we've got a few questions already. That's good, yes. So Lucky and I are now going to answer as many as I can. And just so you know, continue to type in questions and we'll pick them up. We will be sending a transcript of the whole of this webinar a few days after the event. So,
thank you so much, Peter. So we're opening the floor now to questions. So we already have a couple. So the first one we wanted to go through is, so we have one on GMAT waivers. The first one is, how do I qualify for a GMAT waiver?
Okay. So what the Big advantage for us of GMAT and GRE, and I will say we have absolutely no preference. Whichever you prefer, we're perfectly happy with. The big advantage, I think, of GMAT and GRE is that they're available internationally, they're standardized tests, and they're pretty much the norm for business school application. Our experience, however, on the Masters in Finance was that relatively few, or in fact none of our competitors for finance programs were insisting on GMAT. So we reviewed this, and we felt that in a lot of cases, GMAT and GRE weren't giving us significant additional information. And particularly where there was already strong evidence of ability in quantitative subjects and clear evidence of fluency in English. So where we will give GMAT waivers is where people have good grades in a quant subject from a good school. We will automatically give a GMAT waiver where people already have CFA level 2 at the time they apply. And when we're making that decision, we also look at things like the content of your job, what kind of quant ability is evidenced by the job that which you do. So in terms of getting a GMAT waiver, if you don't already have GMAT, I think the first step is to submit your CV for review so that we know that more about you. And then if we think the program is a good fit, then Lucky and her team will start a dialogue with you about whether or not we are likely to give a GMAT waiver. We will normally make a decision before you apply, which is a real plus in terms of planning your time. And I think for people who have other plans, for example, if we give you a GMAT waiver and you're preparing for CFA level 2, for example, it's just freeing up your time to add more value to your CV by getting CFA level 2 or CFA level 3 before you start the program.
So the next question we have is, what does a good GMAT score look like?
Okay, again, I think just going on from the point before, it's really important to stress that we are not making admissions decisions solely on things like GMAT or GRE. Really quite the reverse. They're a factor in our application decisions, but don't get the impression that they're an overarching one. So a good GMAT score isn't going to guarantee you a place on the program, and a relatively weaker score doesn't necessarily rule you out. I think if you've got very strong grades, then a weaker GMAT is going to be fine. But if for whatever reason your previous academic performance is weaker, then a stronger GMAT score can serve really to address that issue and to remove any concerns we may have about your potential success on the program. As a very broad guideline, I would say if your GMAT is below 600, I would really plan to resit, because it's probably likely to be a significant weakness. Between 600 and 650, GMAT, if you like, is a neutral factor. If there are significant other strengths in your application, it's not going to hold you back. Between 650 and 700, GMAT is starting to be a significant positive factor in your application. And above 700, it starts to add really significant value. That's really just to give you a sense of it, but I really want to stress the point that GMAT is seen in the context of the whole of your application. Because ultimately, we're thinking about, will you benefit, will you contribute, what's your broad intellectual ability, what's your commitment and motivation, do you have a real passion for finance? So all of those are the factors that enable us to make our overall decision.
Great. And we have a couple of questions that are based upon kind of how many years work experience are required. So we have somebody who's asked, could someone be admitted with no work experience but internships? Unfortunately, no. You need to have a minimum of 2 years work experience in order to fully benefit and contribute to the program. We've had other people also talking about, if they have more than 2 years work experience, that's completely fine. So as you can see, we have an average of sort of 5.5 years work experience on the full-time program and 7 on the part-time program. It just means that in terms of like the learning environment, people are bringing their kind of practical knowledge and experience, and their peers are going to be learning a lot from them, and it's not just about kind of the lectures and the seminars and the program content. You're learning from your peers and other students, and I think that's what makes the Master in Finance program so special.
Absolutely, and it's important to say that we do have the Masters in Financial Analysis, which is aimed at people who are recent graduates, so up to a maximum of 2 years experience. And that's more geared towards people who are entering the finance industry, so people who might, say, have one internship or whatever. I think the point Lucky's stressing is absolutely critical, that this is a post-experience program, and really to benefit the most from it, I would say 3 years experience is really what you need. And it's also the kind of zone within which recruiters are looking to come to London Business School to hire people. At the higher end of experience, it's a slightly tougher call, but again, that's why we encourage people to submit their CV for review before they apply. So if we don't think it's a good fit for you because you've reached a level of experience where you might be less attractive to the kind of recruiters who are recruiting out of the MIF, we will give you that honest feedback so that you're not expending effort applying for something where ultimately you'll be unsuccessful. That being said, the range of experience is much higher on the part-time program, where we're much more comfortable having more senior people, and more senior people definitely benefit from it, particularly if they enjoy interacting with more junior colleagues, being in perhaps a more mentoring role during the program. And then my final observation there, sorry, and I am hogging the microphone a bit here, is if people are on the full-time program, if people are sponsored, quite often they will be more senior because they're more senior, their employers chose them with a sponsorship. And for us, that's absolutely fine. But in all cases, I would really, really stress, do submit your CV for review before you proceed, so we can have that useful dialogue before you take the next steps.
And we have a kind of similar question, but this question is kind of how stringent is the 2 year finance work experience requirement? So if someone has 2 years plus experience from other sectors, would this person be rejected? Does having an additional finance degree, CFA, for example, mitigate the 2 year finance work experience requirement?
Well, I think again, it's going to be, we really want to, those kind of specific questions are very hard to answer during a webinar. Again, exactly why we would like to see your CV, so we can get a sense of what have you been doing overall. Some work experience can be highly relevant, even if it isn't directly within finance. And I think a point to make here is that we define finance quite broadly, so clearly it's things like investment banking, corporate finance, asset management. But we will have people who are working in, say, financial journalists, for example, or people who've been very much working in consulting within the finance sector, or working the financial function in corporates, all of that is good for us, because for us, actually, diversity isn't just about diversity of nationality or gender. It's incredibly important for us to build a class that has a wide diversity of finance experience, acquired in different industries, in different locations, because all of that adds to the richness of the classroom discussion.
So we have a couple of questions on the IELTS and TOEFL requirements. So somebody just said, I completed my master's degree in English. Do I have to sit the IELTS or TOEFL? What's a good score? Are there any exceptions, any waivers? Yes. So in terms of this, so if you have done your degree in English, then we'll be able to give you a English language test waiver. If you've lived or worked in an English-speaking country for over
Couple of
year or
years,
2 years, then you'd also be eligible for a waiver. We assess your sort of English language capabilities across the program. So, if you feel like your English is, good enough and you speak English on a regular basis in terms of your business and your work experience, then you can put that in your application, and obviously the admissions team will be able to decide whether or not to give you that waiver. We would never say to people not to apply based upon kind of, them thinking they're not going to be able to get a waiver on the TOEFL. We assess that throughout the application. So definitely, if you want to do the program and you feel like your English is good enough, then please do apply.
Absolutely. And it's important to say that if we shortlist you for interview, at least 50% of that interview would be in English. It's important to us that people's level of English is high, and our requirement is probably higher than the norm in UK or US education generally. And that's because classroom participation is so important. On the programme, you're allocated to a study group of 6 or 7 people. You're doing a lot of work in teams. And so you have to be capable, you have to be comfortable with talking English on a day-to-day basis. It's not just enough to sit and understand a lecture. You have to be taking an active part in it. And that's why we put an emphasis on a high standard of fluency in English. But as Lucky said, there's many touch points during the application process that we're assessing that. And if you've got any concerns, again, Lucky and our excellent team are here to have that discussion with you, so you can have some kind of high degree of clarity on that before you proceed with the application.
And there's another question that's come in, which is what leads to the variation in duration of the program? So the 10 to 16 months duration is quite a large range. So you can do the full-time program within a minimum of 10 months. It's maximum 16 because we have an optional 4th term, and that's why there's the extra couple of months at the end of the program. And actually about just over 50% of our students will decide to do the optional 4th term. You might decide to finish off doing, some more electives. You might want to, keep doing some practitioner courses or the technical skills courses. Just enjoy being a student for a little bit longer, staying in London and enjoying the summer with your friends as well. It's a good opportunity.
And also, of course, having the 4-term option, because it extends your studies over the summer period, gives the option for internships, which are very, very useful and not an option, I think, generally on shorter finance programs. And those internship options can be very useful in employment terms, particularly if you're trying to change the area of finance you're working in away from the one you're currently in. The very good thing about the 4-term option is it's a decision you make relatively late. So you certainly don't have to decide that when you apply. In fact, you don't decide it till the April of the programme. So towards the end of the 3rd term, before you start potentially then go on to the 4th term.
Fab. And we also have another question, which is on grades. So somebody has said, my grades aren't the best, but is it worth applying to the program?
Definitely. I mean, I think back to the point that we need to believe that you will pass the program and do well. We aim for 100% graduation, not because we have low standards, quite the reverse, but really because we have a very selective application process to ensure that we are recruiting people who we will believe will pass the program. That being said, it's not at all uncommon for people to have undergraduate performance that isn't necessarily a good indication of their overall ability. Now, that can be for any number of reasons. That can be, maybe there were health issues or family issues while you were studying. Maybe you had other interests during your previous studies. Might have been active in sport, active in student government, those kind of things. It can be as simple as you chose the wrong degree, or you were pressured to do a degree that you weren't really interested in. Or even, to be absolutely frank, that you didn't have perhaps the maturity to realise the importance of grades during previous studies. We're very reasonable people. I mean, for us, it's about giving opportunity to people who we believe deserve it and we believe will do well. You will note that in the application form, there is a question, are your grades a good indication of your future potential? And if not, why not? All I ask of you is that you just really answer that directly and honestly. It is your opportunity really to tell us what we need to know in that regard. But I would say that, if your grades aren't that great, there need to be compensating things there. And that can be good success in your career since you graduated. And also things like GMAT and GRE, a strong score in that instance, can really help to offset a relatively poor undergraduate performance.
And we have another question in a similar sort of vein, which is, I did not go to university, instead I took the ACCA. Can I still apply?
Absolutely, yes. ACCA, for those of you who aren't aware of it, is a British accountancy qualification. We treat that as being degree equivalent. So from our perspective, we would consider you as a graduate and consider you exactly on the basis of all other graduates. Again, I think any questions around how your previous qualifications, your academic track record, again, just to go back to this point, submitting your CV for review is a really good starting point for this dialogue. Because once we know more about you in terms of seeing your CV, we can then start to form a judgment of whether we think you have the potential to submit a strong application, or maybe whether we honestly don't believe you will do, or whether we think there are remedial steps like perhaps getting an additional professional qualification or sitting GMAT, for example, or waiting for perhaps to gain further work experience. Having that dialogue really enables us to give you that form of feedback.
And we have a couple of questions on the essay questions. So sort of what are we really looking for? What are the do's and don'ts, as it were?
Okay. Perhaps this is somebody who dialed in quite late in the webinar. But really just to iterate again that I think the essays are really about telling your own story. Don't be tempted to, there are a million books out there who tell you how to write the perfect business school essay. I've read a few of them and I think they're generally rubbish. What they really encourage you to do is to produce something that looks like everybody else's essays. And I think if you spent the time on self-reflection, thinking about your strengths and weaknesses, thinking about your goals, you're then in a position to tell your own story. And I think the essays, good essays, are really about authenticity. They're your opportunity to market yourself in an authentic way. So I don't have much more to add than that. It's the reflection, I think, is really the key when it comes to essays.
Yeah, I totally agree. We also have a question on scholarships. So, how do I apply for a scholarship?
Okay, right. The scholarship process is you don't need to apply separately because every self-sponsored student for the programme is automatically considered for one of our merit scholarships. There's a range of those. We're just finalising the portfolio of scholarships for the 2020 intake, which we'll put live on the website probably in mid-December. But there's quite a range of scholarships, so do look at that. They're merit-based, so the stronger your application, the stronger you will be as a contender for a scholarship. There are some that are specific to geography, there are some that are specific to gender, so certainly consider those. There are a few that are a very small number that are application-based, and that essentially means they require a short essay. Again, if we make you an offer, we'll give you full details of those at the time you make the offer. For those, it's absolutely imperative that you apply no later than round 4. If you apply any later, you'll miss the deadline for that, because there's a deadline for those in May, and those essay-based scholarships are awarded in mid-June.
And we have a couple of questions on sort of references and referees. Does it have to come from a professional email address? My previous line manager has since left the company.
No, it's fine. No, we completely understand that. So it's perfectly okay if your referee gives you'll give their Gmail or their Hotmail address. We may contact them just to ensure that it's all bona fide and okay. As we would even with where the reference comes from a professional email as well, but that's perfectly acceptable.
And the other one is, how do I send you the references? Is it a scan of both letters? Is a scan of both letters admissible?
Okay, so the references, just to make this point clear, and it's a good one to ask, the references aren't general letters of recommendation written by your referees. How the system works is that when you complete your application online, you're asked to put in the contact details for your 2 referees. Our system then sends off an email to them with a link to our reference system, which asks them 5 or 6 questions about you, and then asks them to grade you on various criteria. They then complete that form online, and when they submit it, it's then electronically attached to your application. They can add in additional letters of recommendation to that, but essentially the process is, our system fires off a form to them, which they complete online. And one point I want to stress here, because I think a lot of people miss this point, is that we judge your application as being complete by when we have your references. So if we reach a stage deadline and we haven't received your references, then potentially you move into the next round. So it's important to you to contact your referees as early as possible. And I would say, when I was talking about having discussions with friends and colleagues and mentors before you proceed with your application, I think it's absolutely vital you have that discussion with your referees. They really need to know what your rationale is for choosing this program at this school, you should be talking through with them why you're attracted to it, why you think it's a good fit for you, because that will really help them. Knowing what your thinking is will really help them to provide a much richer referee and less a reference than if it just comes in unexpected. And do that well in advance. Start that if you're planning to apply, start approaching your referees now, because they can start working on your references immediately, just so you can be sure it's in place by the time you're ready to submit your application.
So we're coming to the end. There's one last question, and it's what is the return on investment for studying the Master in Finance, which I'm happy to answer. So most, if not all of our students come to the program to advance their career or make a change within finance. So, of course, they use the Master in Finance program to accelerate their career, develop the skills that perhaps they're lacking in, and to really sort of kind of fill in the gaps in their knowledge. Of course, in terms of like the faculty and the teaching, they find that incredibly useful. In terms of the students and the peers that they're around, it's expanding your network, your finance network. You also have access to our 44,000 alumni that are across the globe. So you're kind of really kind of tapping into that entrepreneurial and kind of really giving alumni network who are super supportive in terms of like having coffee chats with you, trying to help you to kind of reach those kind of career goals. You have access to our amazing career center, so it's one of the largest career centers in Europe, where you can get tailored advice and feedback on your CV. You can attend the workshops that they offer on sort of networking and kind of you can speak to career leads in various different areas like private equity, investment banking. So really get tailored support and feedback in terms of kind of trying to get that interview at the company that you're aiming for. And also just kind of the amazing kind of social activities and the amazing student experience that we offer here at LBS. So I definitely recommend speaking to some of the students, the current students, and gaining all of that. We have amazing career treks and trips and holidays, and at the end of the program, you'll basically have a friend or a friend in almost every city in the world. So it's incredibly impressive and a lot of fun, and it will definitely broaden your horizons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked on the program since we launched it in 1994. So I'm talking to alumni all the time, and I think people, if I ask this question with alumni, they will say the ROI financially they would judge to come within 2 or 3 years, but they're saying that's really not the point. It really is about something that's on your CV for life. Skills, a skill set that you're going to apply through the rest of your career. The reputation of LBS goes with you all that time. You stress networks. I think that's absolutely it. But I think one of the intangibles that, in terms of ROI, that people miss, and alumni say this to me all the time, is confidence. Is people become much more confident decision makers. That is incredibly important in how you react with colleagues, with clients, with managers, etc. And it is absolutely, I think, the intangible benefits that make programs like this really, really great.
Perfect, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found the webinar really useful and insightful. As mentioned, we'll be sending the transcripts over, so you'll be able to have this in your records. And yes, we hope to hear from you soon. And if you are applying or in the process of applying, all the best, and we wish you luck. Thank you.
Great, thank you all very much, and good afternoon.